Okay, so we have many attendees with us now, so let's get started. Welcome to the Deputy Xero integration training session. Thank you guys for joining us today. My name is Felix and I'm a customer success manager here at Deputy, and I'm also joined by my colleague Sam today. And next slide. We're going to deep dive into the integration between Deputy and Xero today. And together we'll explore how both systems interact with each other and also cover some general tips and tricks. Specifically, we're going to cover how the Deputy and Xero integration works, how to connect Deputy to Xero. We'll also cover how to synchronize employees and leave. And then lastly, spend some time talking about how to export timesheets, pay rates, and awards to Xero. At the end of the training, we will be running a Q&A session, but you can also ask your questions throughout the training, just as seen on the slide right now. We want this session to be interactive, so please ask your questions using the Q&A panel in Zoom as shown on the slides. Don't put it in the chat, as we can't answer those questions. With that said, I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Sam.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us again. For those who have just joined us, this is our third installment in these training webinars. Today, we're going to be doing the Xero integration, which is very exciting. But for those who have joined us in the previous ones, thank you. Today we're going to discover basically how to get the payroll happening between Deputy and Xero. For those who joined us before, we did actually timesheets, which is really handy. So it's going to make a lot of sense for those people who joined us before. But if you haven't, we're going to post some links after this, and you're going to be able to go back and watch our timesheet training webinar. And then even if you want to go further back, you can go to our first one, which is on the scheduling. So let's just start by just talking a little bit about Deputy. So it's a great time and attendance platform, and we've had great success within the healthcare and the hospitality and the retail industries. But as you can see, we've got some names here, big and small. We've been able to save millions of hours of admin with a lot of great automation and really easy to use platform. Specifically, it's just around scheduling. We've got the timesheets and digital clock-ins. We've got a really great communication platform for news feeds and such. We're also a cloud-based platform which works on any kind of device, iOS, Android, iPad, computer. And also, what's a really good segue into what we're about to talk about is our integrations. So we've got a few POS integrations, HR system integrations, but also most importantly, payroll. So today, again, we're going to really unpack one specific payroll integration that we have, which is Xero. And we'll go in a deep dive on that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just jump away from this particular screen here and go into our Deputy account. So what we are going to do is we're just going to start with the basics. Is like we've always started with whenever we're setting stuff up with Deputy, we typically start with the locations. And this is actually going to be our kind of catalyst to how we connect to our first kind of connection process with our Xero account. So what we're going to be trying to do today is establish a connection between our Deputy instance and our Xero instance so we can start sharing some information that's really important. We start with locations, but we'll also start to connect people, and then of course our timesheets and our payroll. So what we have here is a list of our locations on the left hand side, and we're going to jump into a location that we haven't connected, but I'll show you what it looks like to have a connected location as well. I'm going to start by hitting edit settings. And you'll see that if I go away from general and go down to payroll, you'll see that at the very top is Xero, but obviously we've got all of our other cloud connected payroll integrations there. But of course we're doing Xero today, so let's click on that. There'll be a pop-up that comes to the forefront of the screen. And if you just give it a second, it's going to ask if I would like to choose the account. So we're going to connect Tony's Flowers to Tony's Flowers, and we're going to hit allow access. After it takes a second, the pop-up will go away. And as you can see, it's switched on this particular screen here, which is asking us a bit more information about how we want to set it up. In this particular case, and I actually recommend this for all of our deputy users, we're going to turn auto sync off. We will dive into a little bit later about why we want this off, but essentially we want all of the award interpretation and the calculations to be happening inside of deputy before we start to send totals off to Xero. Cool. So I'm going to now hit save now that I've made the changes I want. And to quickly take a step back, if you ever want to look at a location and want to know whether or not it is connected, you just simply go back, edit settings, go to payroll, and you'll see here. This here would not be present if it wasn't connected. And specifically with green text, it says it's connected to Tony's Flowers. And then lastly, always make sure that that's off, because if you're using the deputies awards library, you want to make sure this is off. Otherwise, this being on will replace the awards library that you have by pulling awards, pulling pay rates from Xero and replacing it. But we'll dive in a little bit deeper later on. So I'm going to go back to locations and quickly just show you a quick summary of what we've got here. We've got a list of locations here that you connect one by one, because there might be some locations you don't want to connect to Xero and manage within Deputy. And then we're going to actually spend some time in the People tab. So if I go ahead and click on People, it's going to load my list of people. Now, when it comes to this method of getting people into Deputy, there's actually a few different ways that we can get Xero and Deputy communicating with each other to manage your list of people here. So we're actually going to just simply start by clicking on this Add People button at the top, and we'll work through each one. So at the top, you have the onboarding functionality. Now, this is a pretty nifty mode, because the hypothetical is that you have someone who's new to the company and you want to set them up in Deputy, and then henceforth set them up in Xero. Now, you don't want a lot of double data entry. You just want to kind of do it once, right? So if you click on onboarding employee and you just go through the prompts of setting these fields up, and this is very preliminary information about first name, last name, and some contact information. Now, once you fill that information in and hit onboard now, it's going to send some forms off to these destinations like email address and phone number, and it's going to ask that employee to fill in the rest of their information with information that they have readily available, way more so than a payroll person. So it's going to have like their emergency contact details, it's going to have their TFN and account details and all that kind of stuff. Everything that really goes into an onboarding that's usually a very paper heavy and laborious process. You can just start off with the basics, send it off to your employee, and they'll fill out the rest. Once they've filled it out and it comes back in, it'll look a little bit like Bobby Chalmers that I've set up in previous ones. And once you click on their name and go to HR forms, you'll see that they've gone through all those stages. And the very last thing to hit is the sync button. That's going to synchronize this user over to Xero with the right information, so it's all a safe match. As you can see, it lets us know the specific timestamp that we have on that synchronization being successful, and a little tick box letting us know that it's gone through. So what that's doing is a little concept to kind of get a grasp on, is that this is pushing information. This is setting some information up. It's collating it with the employee to give them a bit of access to helping us fill out this information, and then sending it to Xero to populate it so nothing gets lost in translation. It's all very one for one. Another way is to just simply add one by one. So if we just have one new person that we want to set up, but we don't want to do the onboarding process, this is going to add a single person, but it's only going to add them to Deputy. So it's really good to note that this is a really good method if you've already got that person set up in Xero and you just want to type that information in. What you want to do is you just obviously want to fill out everything that's got the red asterisks there, otherwise you can't complete it. So these mandatory fields are just going to be really important to not only the successful payment of that person within Xero, but it's just going to make them a well set up entity within Deputy, so they can be scheduled properly, they can get leave accrual, they can get their timesheets sorted, all that kind of stuff. So firstly, first name, last name works out. But I think that the most important piece of information to make sure, most important in terms of its connection to Xero, is something that's in the pay rates and leave section. So if I just click on pay rates and leave and then scroll down, you'll see that there's a particular field here which is called timesheet export code. This timesheet export code is actually how we serialize this particular employee, so when it gets exported and tagged on a timesheet, the destination, the payroll platform that's going to pick up on it, will know that this is the identifier that makes sure that the right person is getting paid. In this case, with Xero, they have a very intuitive way of having a timesheet export code. It's simply the first name and last name. So for example, when we have Bobby Chalmers, if Bobby Chalmers is set up in Xero as such, as long as I'm making sure that the first name and last name that I put in this timesheet export field is the same as the first name and last name field on Xero, you've got yourself a match there. And that's going to make sure that the connection is successful. And again, a timesheet export process is going to go through successfully. So really good thing to reiterate there. Timesheet export code, super duper important to making sure that timesheets are successful. Now, what we'll do is by making sure that not only are you filling out the general information, but pay rates and leave, you're successfully setting this person up within Deputy. So they've got the right information. So scheduling, timesheets, all that can go through. So I'll just go back now and I'll go through some of the other points before we start to go into award management. So another one here is, again, we've talked about the push and the pull of this data. And so what we're going to do is we're going to think of this way as a pull. So we've got not a lot of information in Deputy, but we've got a very well set up Xero account. And we don't want to have to double handle information. We know that it's in the Xero account. We just want to pull it in as is and pop it in our Deputy account. So what we'll do is we'll select the location that we want to assign them to. And then we'll also select the system that we're pulling it from. So in this case, it's Xero. It's going to go through that recheck as like the re-login to make sure it's a right Xero account. And then here, these are all of the users that I have set up in my Xero trial, Tony's Flowers, to connect. Now, by no means do you need to use everyone, and I suggest you don't, because in this case, this first entry is blank. So we'll go ahead and hit that very easily. You can just go ahead and hit that bin button, and it's going to get rid of the people that you don't want, like so. But I've already got all these people, so once I hit add, it will then add all of these users with the first name, last name, email address, all that kind of stuff, and phone number to the Deputy account. Please note that for people who are new to Deputy and setting it up from scratch, if you want to have a phased approach where you set everyone up in Deputy and then you test some timesheets in the schedule, make sure that you tick this off, because usually those people want to invite the Deputy users, the employees, at a later stage. Yeah, this happens very easily and quite often. So just make sure that that's off if you're just still wanting to add the people but still test them. Cool. So for this particular, we're not actually going to add them for this particular test. But if I did hit add and those people didn't already exist in the people list, they would now be in my list of people. Now another one is this advanced CSV import. This advanced CSV import is actually going to be a way of having a spreadsheet held separately and then just basically attaching a spreadsheet to this particular function, and then it's going to add your people from there. Now, what we have is we have a sample CSV that we will send in a follow-up, send like tomorrow in the follow-up for this webinar, and that sample CSV is going to show you the fields that you're going to need to consider when populating a CSV. That's going to make sure that it gets matched and adding it's really good for if you want to add like 50 people or something like that in one go, because it's very no fuss. But what you do need to consider is you've got to add the right fields. Now, as we mentioned earlier, it's not mandatory to add a timesheet export field in order to set people up in your Deputy account. However, if you want this to successfully connect with a Xero account, one of those fields in the CSV that we'll send a sample for will be timesheet export code. So in the same way that we've got all of this very easy to see user interface, one of the fields within the CSV that you add and upload will be timesheet export field. So that'll just be a copy paste from the first and last name essentially. Cool. So what we've done is we've talked about a few different ways, and as you can see, there's heaps of different ways that you can get people populated into your deputy account, but with a slight consideration that is, if I'm going to add people to my deputy account and invite them and get them using deputy, there's going to need to be a consideration as to how their information is filled out so it can successfully connects with Xero. Another really important thing to mention is when you're setting up your people, when you do it using this function that I showed you earlier, even though it's not a field that you see obviously here, because it's got first name, so it's got name, email, and phone number. In the background, when we add those people, it automatically adds the first and last name string to the timesheet export field. So that's really important to know. Now, lastly, because Xero work on that very literal mapping exercise to have first name, last name as the timesheet export field, make sure that when you're ready to invite your people, advise them not to change their names, because when you invite deputy users, they can manage a lot of information themselves, like in the onboarding process, about like their name and nickname and all that kind of stuff. But please note that it's not a good idea for them to change it, because Xero requires the name to be the same as what's on Xero. So unless you're willing within payroll to change the names in Xero to match, I wouldn't advise that you let them change their names, because it can slow down or stop the payroll process from being successful. But we'll go into that when we spend some time in Xero. But what I'll do is I'm just going to jump into the timesheet section. So now we've covered applications, and we're going to go through what it's like to approve and send a timesheet over to Xero. So let's say that we got some timesheets that we want to approve and then export over to Xero. It's just a simple matter, and if you joined us in our last session, it's just a simple matter of looking over the timesheets, being happy with them, going ahead and hitting approve. Once it does that, it locks it in. As you can see, we're on the Greer Award, which we'll spend a bit more time unpacking. And yeah, let's say that we want to send over this previous week's Jake's 3 timesheets. Let's say we're happy with those. We want to include it in the next pay run and send it over to Xero. Then we want to approve them. No, we've done that, and then we go to export. Just so we know, another great habit for everyone to get into is if you're ever unsure or you've made some changes in the people tab about, for example, Jake's pay rate or something like that, you can go ahead and hit unapprove. And when you hit reapprove, it's going to recalculate the changes that we've made. Whereas if you made the changes and then go straight to exporting, the changes would not have been applied. Great. So let's go ahead and hit export. So if we go to that week parameter that we wanted to export, we've got Jake's 3 timesheets that we mentioned, and let's just go ahead and hit export selected items. Now, the first thing that we have a look at, but it defaults to, is Xero, based on our connection process earlier. But if we have a look, we'll just click on the drop-down menu, and it's really good to see. As you can see, there's tons of payroll platforms that we integrate with, but for the purpose of this exercise, let's stick to Xero. Now, another thing to really be sure about is this particular tick box here. So this is what I mentioned earlier about making sure that within Deputy, you're not turning on the location when people sync, because we want to use the Deputy Awards library. It's a big reason why people come to Deputy, is because we want not only Deputy to be a time and attendance platform, but we want it to do the award interpretation. So it's as compliant as possible and all that jazz. In this case, make sure that this tick box is always remains ticked, but just in case it's not, make sure it is ticked. And what that does is it makes sure that not only all the hours are being calculated, but the pay rates and the award are being interpreted within Deputy too. So then all that Xero has to do is just consume this information. We don't have to rely on Xero of double handling calculations that can sometimes get lost within the integration. So if we go ahead and hit export, we're going to give it a few seconds while it thinks away. Now, if you're doing like 30 or 50, even 100 timesheets, expect it's going to take a few seconds longer, but otherwise it's still pretty quick for what it's trying to do. And now that it's complete, we're going to jump over to Xero and we're going to see where these landed. So we're going to go into Xero, we're going to go into pay employees, and we're going to add a pay run. So let's hit add. Now we're going to add an unscheduled pay run because we don't want the week ending in the 7th. Pretty sure it was the 21st that week ended. But also just go back and double check, see? The 21st. Great. So we'll go down here. We'll go to the week ending the 21st. Could be fortnightly, could be monthly, by the way, just based on the setup that you've already done previously, like the assumed setup for Deputy and Xero. And then we go ahead and hit next. It's going to give us the people that are included on the timesheet. So in this case, we want Jake. And once we hit this button here, it gives us a quick little summary. And then when we post the pay run, it pops it in a like out of draft mode, and it locks it in for us to use at a later date. Yeah, so that is how to see where it's landed. And what we also did is we did 3 main types of timesheets here. So what we did is we did an actual, as you can see, it's just he worked in the HQ, he worked in the admin, and he did an annual leave. And the reason why we wanted to kind of robustly test all these different aspects. Leave is something that we'll get into a little bit later as well, but it's really good to see how this information gets broken down. So if I click on Jake's name and have a look now down this list, we'll see that the annual leave was 8 hours at that 25 rate, 200. So it gives us a really good summary of this. And if there's any pay line items that you want to remove from the pay slip, you can just hit that X. As you can see, we don't want that kind of thing. Fantastic. Okay, cool. So what I'll quickly do now is I'll spend a few minutes jumping back into the Deputy account, and I'll spend a little bit of time talking about awards. So now that we've got a timesheet that's successfully gone through, if we just click on one of the people that have a timesheet against them, so we'll go here, we'll go approve. Let's just say that we have Amy here for this Wednesday shift. We've got this Greer award here, but we realize that it's a full-time one and we actually wanted Amy here to be casual. So if we go back to people, we'll find Amy there. We'll go to edit profile. We're going to go to pay rates and leave. And then we're going to change this, this Greer right here. We could type in the acronym for it and find that the casual 1st of March then it's been updated. We'll pop in the pay rate. We hit save details. And again, I really wanted to enforce that great habit for everyone to understand that once you hit save and you make some changes to a person, and if it's got to do with their pay and their award, we want to make sure that we're unapproving and reapproving that timesheet. And as we can see, now that we've done this, it's changed it from the full-time to the casual. Ta-da! Wonderful. Okay, so now what we'll do is, now that we've kind of covered the payment and the process behind it, we're going to talk a little bit about leave, which is something that we covered, which is something that we mentioned earlier in the timesheets as well. And to do so, we're going to go back over to our spreadsheet, so our presentation here. Okay, so what this is here is this is a list of all of the default leave that's loaded into a premium account when you first get it. And that's we're kind of presenting this on the left-hand side here. So that's just your basics, like your annual leave, your sick leave, your bereavement, and all that kind of stuff. And then on the right-hand side is the naming conventions that are loaded in Xero. What you want to make sure is that you're not kind of changing this. This is all going to work out of the box, which is great. But what you should do, because again, we're entertaining that hypothetical where we've got someone who's got a set up Xero account and is new to Deputy. So let's assume that that's the case. As long as you can check those leave names in Xero and then also check those leave names in your Deputy account, that's going to be the standard as per is, and it's going to work. So if you've got people who have got approved leave through the Deputy process by a manager, and then it's been exported in a timesheet, when it lands in Xero, it's going to match and accrue and calculate correctly, which is great. this whole matching process, again, is reinforced as that mapping. The connection's really important, but we put a little disclaimer at the bottom. But basically, if you change, let's say you go to the global settings in Deputy and you change any of the naming conventions or the export type or code or such with your Deputy leave type, it can break that connection. So if you go ahead and then export a timesheet, you'll get some errors, or it just simply won't show up in Xero. So that's just something to look out for, and we can help you troubleshoot that through our support process. Yeah, so what we've got is just, that list there. I believe that that's probably the best way for us to kind of show the end-to-end use. And what we'll do is we'll kind of pivot into our Q&A section, where we'll have a lot of great questions, as we've always gotten, to kind of look through the other aspects of it. So hey, Felix, how's the Q&A going?
Pretty good, Sam. Thanks a lot. Yeah, we got a lot of good questions. And in fact, a few of my colleagues who are still in the Q&A section are trying to answer them all.
Oh, that's awesome.
All the ones that we can't cover now in the Q&A, please feel free to just post more and more. We will actually send out, like we did with the other webinars, we will send out a document with all of them in by, I think, the end of tomorrow.
Okay, cool. If it's okay, I've just wanted to quickly do a recap before we
Sure.
get into the first set of questions.
Sure.
So firstly, again, what we've covered today is we've just gone through generally what the Xero and Deputy integration does. We've gone through the connection process, like with the locations. We've gone through the synchronization process of all the different ways that you can get employees in Deputy and into Xero and vice versa. We've gone through the export timesheets, as well as the pay rates and the awards management, and then just the general tips and tricks, which we'll probably reinforce in the Q&A as well. Just lastly, the next steps. So again, as Felix said, we've got a survey coming up. We've got a recording of this that's going to go out. And we've got another topic that we're going to pick soon. On the 16th of July, we're going to do another webinar. But what's really helpful with the things like the survey and stuff is for you to tell us what we should be picking and focusing on. That's going to be the most impact to you guys. Because, if we just go off on these technical tangents and start picking our own topics, you guys might not find anything interesting with it. So if you tell us what we need to do, you're going to have a better time with it. So yeah, let's jump into the Q&A.
There you go. Thanks a lot. So yeah, the first question was, how do I re-export timesheets if we made changes to the timesheets in Deputy? And what you got to do is, first of all, even before you, like let's say you changed the timesheet, you changed pay rates or something which Sam touched on before. In Xero, if you've already exported timesheets into Xero, and sorry, Sam, we have to jump to Xero now.
Yeah. Let's go.
There would be they would be in there already as timesheets. So we need to delete. First of all, we need to turn those timesheets, like Jake's here, into a draft timesheet or delete those timesheets, because if they're already in Xero, and you want to export the same timesheets for the same period in there, it actually doesn't work and the export fails. So a lot of times that is the reason you actually have to delete them in Xero, basically to make space for the correct timesheet with the correct times on it.
That's right. In this case, this is already a draft, but if this is an approved one already, you unapprove it, you delete the timesheet. And then
exactly
now
right.
There. And then we would jump back into Deputy. We make adjustments. So you want to unapprove it.
Correct.
You make the adjustments. Let's say it's a 10 a.m. start. You hit approve. And then we export it. That same process as before.
Correct. And then the second question, I've changed someone's, a little bit touching on that. I've changed someone's pay rate and that is not reflecting in Xero. Why is that? So again, I think Sam touched already on this. So if you change someone's pay rate, and especially if you're midway through a pay run, so let's say it's a Wednesday and your pay run is weekly, and you always export on Tuesdays, and we can actually do this right now. So if we change Bobby's rate to 25, the most important thing is you have to go to the timesheet section and unapprove all the timesheets from the current pay cycle.
Yeah, so let's pretend that
So,
this is Bobby Chalmers. You want to, yeah.
correct. So if Bobby
approve.
Chalmers would be in there and there's now 3 timesheets or 2 timesheets, let's say if it's Wednesday, there's a time, Bobby Chalmers a timesheet for Monday and Tuesday, you would have to unapprove those timesheets, then reapprove them, and then do another export.
And you'll get kind of confirmation of that change towards the bottom, and the export as well will have a different amount that it's going to export.
Correct. And that's actually a very good point. So underneath here under pay rates, that's where you can see if it has already grabbed the new pay rate. For example, if in this case Bonnie would have been not set up with an award rate before, now she is, and you see there's an award rate in there. So you see it has grabbed the new pay rate. And then we go to export and do the actual export. Correct. And when we do, there's one more thing. Actually, make sure that this little box is also, right? If you click on it, sorry, if you click on export, select again.
Oh yeah, yeah.
There we go. And then that little box. So if the new rate is not reflected in Xero yet, it could also be because that box is not ticked. So make sure that it is ticked, then press export, and then it will have the new rate in Xero as well.
It's not. I don't think it's going to like me here. Because with this particular entry, we have to put in more information to do with Bonnie in Xero before it connects, and that's the whole mapping exercise. This is actually good to show off because we have an incomplete mapping right here. We don't have a one-for-one match with the information that we've populated in Deputy and Xero. It really does need to be completely set up. Really good way to troubleshoot that is to make sure that the information that you've got against Bonnie is the same information that you've got set up on Xero.
And also the export code. Maybe show the export code as well in Deputy.
Yeah, because what I did earlier is I showed how we can add it for Bobby Chalmers. If we go down here, we've got Bonnie there. So most likely, I think what the gap there is within Xero, we need to put in bank account information and stuff like that. Really does need to query, a very comprehensively fully set up employee. And again, a lot of that is assumed with this connection process because we're dealing with the hypothetical of someone who's newer to Deputy, who's already got quite a set up Xero account. But you just reverse engineer everything that we're teaching you now to think about the other way around.
And while we're on that topic, Sam, because there was a question about changing email addresses in one system and not the other. So I think if you could go back to Bonnie and to the export code, because if you don't, or let me start somewhere else, Deputy and Xero, if you have they use as an export code, or they map the actual name of the staff member in Xero. So if you go to pay rates down at the bottom, their name in Xero is what the timesheet export code has to be in Deputy. If you have that in there, there's a mapping that's going on. So it maps Bonnie in Deputy to Bonnie in Xero. Now, if you then want to change the email address, or you want to change, you want to put a second first name in or something like that, because this mapping is already happening, you can do that. You can change her name in, let's say, Deputy and put a second first name in or something like that, because it does match those two profiles already.
Yeah.
Or if she gets married and she has now a different last name. So I hope that answers that question. Cool. Then we have actually another question regarding that. What details need to match on employee profiles in both systems? So it's the first name, last name, and email address, or, and this is what we just showed, the employee export code in Deputy has to match the name in Xero. And if that is the case, you can do any changes to, the first name, last name, or email address.
Yeah, and to take that,
but it's one or the other.
Deputy is a really, really it's a really great platform. When we invite employees, we do, we do allow them to kind of contribute a lot to admin tasks that usually take a long time for one person to do. So, for example, when we do the onboarding process, just kind of setting up the template we set the employee, and then they fill out all the details like they've probably filled it out a million times, answering questions that they're best suited to answer rather than have a person collate this information and manually type it in. So when you kind of gone through that process, one of the things that that employees can do is they can kind of give themselves nicknames and stuff. Like they can change their name. Now it's just really good to know that for everyone that's using Xero, please know that yes, they can do this, but advise them not to, because it will cause issues with the payroll process. Because we're gonna need to keep the first name and last name the same as per they are in Xero. So again, if there's that process of change, let's say again, like when he gets married, when he changes the last name, make sure that you're changing it in Xero before changing it in Deputy. And then when you are approve and reapprove, and then the export's not going to have an error. So there's, these kinds of things you can overcome. You can fix these issues. You just have to do it in a kind of a particular order. And you have to help figure out which is the best order to do things. You've got to think about the way information's moving between systems. So in this case, Xero is the source of truth about people's names and stuff. So because it's the trigger of the payroll. So make sure that that's matching what you've got in Deputy.
The same with leave, by the way. No, because the leave is also the source of truth for leave is within Xero. There's another question sort of close to this. Can you apply an award rate to some employees but not to others? And I think we can even show this in here, right, Sam? So if we go on there, I think not all of the employees are set up with award rates. So if you click also show and then, or we do it like this.
I think I have set everyone to an award rate, but yes.
Oh, really? I mean, we can put Jack Johnson now on an hourly rate.
Yeah, exactly.
And then just show how that would look like. So yes, that is doable. And we can also export them like that. And then another question, which was regarding this, if someone is on a salary, so if you want to put an hourly rate in, that is totally doable. So you can have half your employees on an award rate and then, the other half on, let's say, an hourly rate. Perfect.
Cool.
And maybe if you click also show in the people tab, and we can show this. And then, all right, if you could also show and then tick the pay rates. Sorry.
Oh, right, yes.
The morning coffee, right? There we go.
Yeah.
That shows it pretty well. So if we go to if you scroll to the bottom, there we go. So Jack Johnson is set up with an hourly rate and the other ones are set up with awards. No problem at all. If he is set up with a salary, to address the other question that came through, his timesheets would actually not get exported. So we, in general, don't export any timesheets for salaried staff. They, because they're getting paid the same amount every week anyways. So regardless of the hours and regardless of when they clocked in and clocked out. So salaried staff members will not get exported in general. Cool. Then what else do we have? Can you please explain further why the auto sync employees function should not be selected? So maybe if you can go back to the locations tab and then can show this a little, first of all, to show what we mean by that. Correct. So this button here, I think when you demoed it, you actually mentioned to turn this off. And this is, I think, what this question is addressing. If we have this button on, it will actually synchronize the pay rates from Xero and will actually overwrite them, the ones in Deputy. So if in this example, what we're showcasing today, it is that we're using Deputy as the source of truth for pay rates. And if that's the case in your business, if you want to have, if you want to set up award rates within Deputy, let's say, and you want to use that as the source of truth, you do want the data to flow from Deputy to Xero. and override it there, not the other way around. That's why we have to turn the auto sync employee button off.
That's right. And that's kind of like, I mean, the best way to kind of explain that is that Deputy being the time and attendance platform and also calculating within the same environment the pay rates based on the awards that we have built in to our awards library is going to present more accurate totals for a payroll system to consume. But if you just export time and attendance, then you're basically sending a lot of random numbers to Xero to then try and interpret and then calculate. There's a lot of information to be sent and to be kind of considered and translated. Whereas it's a lot easier for something like Deputy to keep and calculate all based on the schedule what people are getting paid, and then querying within the timesheet approval process the things like overtime allowances, weekly overtime, all that kind of stuff, and then just tallying, like doing that kind of like clever calculations within Deputy, and then just having some totals to export to Xero, and Xero knows what to do with that and how to pay it. Whereas if you have the synchronization on, you're asking two systems to do things that they're kind of not comfortable doing because of the integration process. It's a lot smoother when you're relying on Deputy to do the award calculations and interpretations, and then just sending off information for Xero to just go, okay, I'm going to pay that. It's a lot easier to troubleshoot it as well. That's why we have it default off. But there's instances where that we've got some people who have it all set up in Xero and they need it to be like that, and we kind of work through those on a case by case. But it's like advised and best suited to do with this kind of setup and approach.
Cool. Another question is probably not really regarding specifically Xero, but how do I change the email address in Deputy? And this is a good one, because as long as, or while you're, when you create an employee, while this person hasn't accepted their invitation, in this case, we have Deborah Brown here as a good example, either because they haven't accepted the invitation, they haven't created their own profile, or like in Deborah's case here, we actually haven't sent out the invitation to her yet, you can still change the email address in here. After that invitation got accepted and Deborah has created her profile, this will be locked and you will not be able to see this anymore. What Sam is showing now, actually. There we go. So you will see how this is grayed out here at the bottom. And it will say edit your global profile because Sam is clicking now on his own profile. But if you click on someone else's, the only way to change that is if the employee itself goes to global settings and changes their email address in there. And this is for data security reasons. It's the same with the mobile number as well.
That's right. Awesome.
And then we had another good question. About, sorry. It says employee was not found in Xero, yet the employee is in Xero. So maybe we should jump to Xero, Sam, in this case, because it could be that if...
was this when we did Bonnie?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Yes. I'm not sure if the question is regarding that. It might be that the customer has a problem like that. But one thing that could be the case is the actual start date of the employee. So make sure that the start date in Xero, when the employee started working for you, is not in the future.
Yeah. Or is there at all? In this case,
or is there at all?
So because basically, if you have a pay run for an employee that doesn't have a start date, doesn't know how to pay the employee, doesn't know all the accruals, doesn't know how they exist in the account. As far as Xero is concerned, they're an incomplete employee in the setup. So how can they be a part of a pay run? So that's why we kind of got that error. There's a lot of other information that you want to consider as well. It needs things like bank account details and all that kind of stuff. They basically need to be a payable employee before any timesheets are accepted and payable in pay runs. So yeah, with Bonnie, definitely not a complete entry for us to pay yet. But yeah.
Right. Then we also have a question, probably if we jump back to deputy, how can we personalize or manually enter loadings? So if we maybe jump into a timesheet and unapprove the pay and just show how we can attach a loading manually to it. So maybe should we use Bonnie or Jake in this case? Oh, that's an annual leave one. I think probably this is a better one. Correct. So if we unapprove the pay, no, sorry, Sam, we actually have to unapprove the pay, not the time.
Oh, right.
Sorry. It's the coffee. There we go. Yeah, so once you unapprove the pay, here at the bottom you can attach, if the person is already attached, the employee is already attached to an award. In this case, Bonnie is attached to the GRIA award. We can actually choose the loadings here manually, and then sometimes it's units, sometimes it's hours. You can add this manually and then approve the pay again, and then you would have that attached to that timesheet, and you will actually see it down here as well. In this case, we added a first aid allowance to it.
Yeah, there are many other allowances you can apply, and they have different units, as Felix says.
Correct. Then someone asked, where can we find the award library? We cannot see it, so maybe we should show that again, because that's an important one as well. So if you want to set up an employee with an award, make sure you go into the pay rate section, and then at the top, where in this case we've chosen hourly for Jack Johnson, if we click on there, and then you either can scroll down and scroll through the whole award library.
There's a lot, guys. So
but there's a lot there.
Type in the acronym. So it could be HEGA, could be GRIA, could be SHADS.
Correct. And I feel like one thing we do need to mention, though, this is for the Australian accounts. So if you are in a New Zealand account, let's say, you would not see this. You will not see our award library. You will only see the actual rates at the top.
Or it'd be a lot shorter, because Australia has a lot of awards.
Correct. So this is now our demo account that we use here is an Australian account. So we have the Australian award library in there. If you are, watching this webinar from a different region, like let's say New Zealand, you might see different things there. So this could be, I'm not sure if that person is anonymous, if that person is from a different region. Correct. And then two things, make sure you choose the correct, first of all, the correct award, right? Make sure the correct version as well. So in this case, Jack Johnson is a casual, and then also always choose the latest update to be compliant.
And then also in regards to compliance and stuff, obviously there's two great resources. Obviously the best one is Fair Work Australia, but then also within our help documentation, we go through and audit constantly our awards within our support. So we have a support help document at Deputy based on every single award that we do our best to interpret and build into Deputy. So what that looks like is typically it's a huge list of all of the considered allowances and overtimes and the actual calculators associated with it, but also we specify what is and isn't automated. So to quickly pivot back to our timesheets, do you remember how we just unapproved pay? So what we do is we actually list within that document based on, let's say you're trying to read up on how we do SHADS or how we do GRIA. We list all of the allowances that are and aren't automated. So it's really good for people who are new to Deputy. Anyone here who's attending that's part of payroll for any business, just have that document on file and handy. And for those people who need it, just send us an email, get through our support. We'll make sure that we can send you our supporting documents that help you understand because basically we have a technical document that shows how we think GRIA is interpreted and how the automation works and how certain aspects aren't automated. And then when you're doing timesheets and there's a slightly different behavior, at least you've got that document that shows, oh, okay, that's because, let's say, you were expecting first aid allowance to be automated. Well, in this case, it's actually not. So it's a manual application. So you can consider that when you're approving timesheets that you're going to have to make some adjustments for certain manual considerations that aren't automated.
Right.
Sorry, I know it's a big one, but it's really good for everyone to have have that version available. So yeah, let us know if we can give it to you.
Yes, and good thing is actually, Robert, yeah, if you go back, because there are a few questions regarding the awards. One is, can we get a support document on the GRIA award? We will actually, with all of those questions, we will address them afterwards. So we will link whenever there is a support article that we have, or let's say a link to Fair Work Australia, we will attach them to those questions.
Yep.
But another question was, actually two questions regarding the actual award rates. So if we can jump back in the people tab.
Sure.
And just choose anyone that's set up with an award.
I'm going to pick on Jack.
Favorite musician.
Yeah.
There you go. Banana pancakes. Okay. So if we go down, if you just choose and just, let's say, maybe we should stick with GRIA.
Sure.
So first question was, someone asked, what is the difference between, the dates behind it, basically, and those are always the updates.
That's
so if there's updates to an actual award, to multipliers within an award, to loadings, all that kind of stuff, we will implement that in Deputy and will upload it in here as a new version. Mm-hmm. And then the second question is actually regarding this. This doesn't happen automatically, meaning, it happens that we put that in there, but we will not attach the automated new award rate to your employees. We do send out emails though whenever something like that happens.
Yep.
In this case here, GRIA is a good one because the last update was on 1st March of 2020. And then you have to attach that manually.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is that some employers choose to keep, the old award in there, and they pay above the award to stay compliant. But if you don't do that, as an
extension of that, a lot of people might be wondering why do we have awards in there all the way back from 2017. The reason is because you might need to go back and approve and reapprove or make adjustments to very, very old timesheets, and you need to have the applicable award that is being checked against, that is being calculated and queried in terms of the multipliers. So you need to have that. Even though it makes for a very dense list of awards, they do need to be there for those edge case scenarios where we have people in payroll who still need that old version to play around with at any given time. So that's probably hopefully a question on the list. But yeah, that's probably why the list is so big and why we've got so many old awards in there.
There's another one actually regarding this. When someone is under 21, does the award rate auto update once they sort of reach the next level, once the next age award at their birthday? And maybe you could show one that has multiple levels. Not sure if it's the GRIA award, Sam, but we definitely do have some HIGA, I think.
Oh yeah, HIGA's a good one.
I think HIGA has that. Was it not HIGA? One that has levels?
Here we go. Yeah, so we've got level
There's
one here.
Correct.
And then, yeah.
Correct. So if someone is, let's say, on level 1, for whatever reason, or due to the age, etc., and they need to, get pushed onto level 2, that is also something that doesn't happen automatically. Same as what we just touched on before, if there's actually an update to an award. So that has to be done manually. You just choose then the next level, basically, put in the new pay rate, press save at the bottom, and then
unapproved and reapproved timesheets.
And then actually, I think because there were questions should we show? I think we should show that again because there are questions in the
Sure.
the Q&A section. So that is something that, and that's something that we also a lot of times see as
Again, you're only
CSMs.
wanting to unapprove and reapprove it for the timesheets that you want the change that you've just made to be applicable for, to be exported for.
Correct.
Which like you might not need to unapprove and reapprove it if you actually want to lock that historical data in. So what I'm saying is that 99.9% of the time, unapproving and reapproving is the right thing to do. But there's that particular scenario I just explained that you might want to keep that information locked in.
Correct. And another one is, we have an EBA. Can we get that loaded into the awards library? If you actually have an EBA, something I suppose we can't really show in here, but please reach out to our support team, because we do need to find out a little more details, and then that can be potentially built into your account. But it's like can't answer this too broadly, let's say, or too specific, sorry. So please reach out to our support chat, and they can, and then we go from there, and they can, we'll ask you a few more details about that. Another thing was, can employees see each other's pay rates? So if we go into the People tab, maybe we should quickly open the access level.
Yeah, I think what we'll do is we're actually probably going to do that as one of the topics coming up. It's going to be about levels, access,
Correct.
and permissions and stuff like that. Essentially, people,
Sure.
as long as you're an employee, you can't see each other's pay. It's just really a supervisor, location manager. You can manage those permissions as well. We've got a document that's going to be sent out that shows it's very easy kind of visual representation of what accesses and tick boxes are available for depending on what access level you've got.
Correct.
So yeah, we'll send that off as supporting. But I think
and also
left.
and also what kind of permissions they have. Yeah, you're right.
Totally.
Cool. We are at the end. Thanks a lot, everyone. That was an awesome session, and we got a lot of questions, and there's probably a lot of them still unanswered. So we will get through them. We'll answer them all and send them out as a document alongside with the recording of this webinar. And if there's anything else that maybe we haven't covered or any other questions you have, feel free to reach out to our support chat. And then lastly, the feedback form, please fill that out. Let us know how we did today, and also future topics if there's anything that you guys want to talk about.
Thanks, everyone. Looking forward
to doing it again.
Thank you very much. Sweet.
Thanks a lot.